Decoding the Copper Scroll 3Q15. The Copper Scroll treasure list has captivated imaginations ever since it was unearthed in a cave by the Dead Sea in 1952. Against the tide of scholarly opinion, this investigation will show how the numbers which were paraded as biblical talents and cubits on the Copper Scroll have proved to be encrypted tables of astronomy. How fortunate we are that the scribes future-proofed the numbers on the Copper Scroll by encasing them in mathematical checksums. The use of checksums was outlined in the Talmud, and it involved adding up the numbers in identifiable groups to get particular totals. In that way, the values of suspect numbers on eroded parts of the Copper Scroll were identified by the checksums. It is now fascinating to view the display of the Copper Scroll in its original tabular format. It looks like a bookkeeping ledger. And there it is in its tabular format. I have just shown rows or sites 1 to 29 so that we can actually see the text and the numbers. There's columns, the local site details, of which some of the details were very pertinent to this investigation. The cubits, the rows or sites, the treasures, and there's the treasure numbers. And there are in red are the numbers which were identified by the checksums. They had been missing or suspect. There were 7 sets of Greek letters and 2 Greek loanwords in the first 16 columns of the scroll. Then there were spurs, and the spurs were caused by extra treasures at some of the sites, and a spur had to be provided to actually cater for the number of treasures, and there and there. The outcome of the checksum exercise led to unveiling the secret knowledge on the Copper Scroll. That encoded knowledge consisted of tables of astronomy with the orbits and long-term cycles of the planets, a timetable to forecast the future in lots of 777 days, the layout of a cross on the Copper Scroll, 4 Paleo-Hebrew letters which spell the name Yahweh. Let's see how the checksums had worked miracles. First question asked is, how reliable were those numbers on the eroded parts of the Copper Scroll? To find out, 8 different English translations of the scroll were referenced, and names were, and there's the names of the translators. The 8 translators had identified mostly the same values for the numbers on the scroll. The main English translation of the Copper Scroll in this investigation was by Emily Puech, and his 2 publications are listed there. Puech had identified 2 sets of extra numbers on the Copper Scroll, but what was between those numbers was as dramatic as the apple that fell on Newton's head. There were plus signs between the numbers. The plus signs indicate the numbers were to be added together, and that was how the checksums were detected. With checksums, the numbers in a group are added up in sequence to see if the result was a recognizable total. The 7 sets of Greek letters formed the numbers into mini-groups. Surprisingly, the one number with 65 between the Greek letters HN and OE was the same as the first age of Enoch in Genesis chapter 5. The trail had led to the unbelievable ages of the first patriarchs in that chapter, and they proved to be the recognizable totals for the checksums. The checksum exercise began by adding up the numbers of cubits and treasures in sequence after the Greek letter HN on row 6, right down to the last Greek letter EK on row 16. The total came to 937, which was short of the final age of Methuselah at 969 years by 32. But there was a missing number on row 16 due to erosion of the copper. By adding up the treasures only between the Greek letters D1 and EK, the total at 745 was also 32 short of the final age of Lamech at 777 years. Now there's Methuselah at 969 years. There's the total, and 32 is put in there for the missing number, and the total comes to 69. And to verify that 32 was correct, here's the Lamech with 777 years. The total with the 32 came to 777. Now, 6 checksums verified that 32 was the original number. That was how checksums work, and the true identity of the other suspect numbers are shown in red on the spreadsheet. Spurs were added to the spreadsheet to insert extra numbers of treasures at 7 of the sites. Many of the checksums were formed into groups by the Greek letters and spurs shown in blue. 5 totals with Lamech at 777 on the scroll. For ease of presentation, the totals of the numbers of treasures on rows 16 and 86 and on rows 29 and 76 are shown in the tables. But these are the tables, and the checksums on the copper scroll use the ages of the likes of Methuselah and Lamech and the descendants of Adams as the checksum totals. Now, it has to be stressed the numbers are all in sequence. They're not chosen willy-nilly. The numbers are all in sequence on the tables. And the numbers, because they added up cupids and treasures, it made the numbers were neutral and are applied as either days or years. Then there's Methuselah, and look how the table is formed with the numbers between the Greek letters. The same here with Lamech. The same again with the second age of Methuselah. Lamech again, and Malahil. Now, you can take a look at the checksums. You can see where the numbers were corrected by the checksums there in red. Now, strangely, there was 5 totals with Lamech at 777. 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's the 5th. And the reason for this will become evident later. The tree of celestial knowledge on the copper scroll. While forming the checksums by adding the numbers in sequence, several of the orbits of the planets were encountered as follows: Mercury, Venus, solar year, lunar year, and Mars. And there's a reference to tables, the origins of tables, going back to Sumer. In previous research, I had found that the various dimensions of the biblical tabernacle in square cubits had the same totals as the orbits of the planets. The planets also have long-term cycles that rarely feature in the public. The Dead Sea Scroll 4Q319 referred to conjunctions in the 7th and 8th year, and we know today that they were with Mercury and Venus crossing the face of the Sun. There were long-term cycles or goal years listed on Babylonian tablets. There's getting back to the 4th century BC, and there's a reference to that. The long-term cycles on the tablets were 46 years with Mercury, 8 years with Venus, 79 years with Mars, and 344 years with Jupiter. The long-term cycles of all the planets were detected in the dimensions of the tabernacle, and it is iconic furniture as follows. And there's the long-term cycles. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. You might pause the video and take a note of those numbers because they're going to come up in the next slide. The ensuing investigation was dramatic, where those long-term cycles with the planets were also on the copper scroll, including the extraordinary periods of 7 years, 777 years, 777 plus 777 years, and 7,777 years. Something eye-catching happened when the tables with the planets were drawn onto a spreadsheet copy of the copper scroll. The table formed into the shape of a tree with a trunk laden with cubits and treasures, and the planets uniformly distributed like branches as shown in layer C. A picture paints 1,000 words, and the orbits are shown in dark green colour and the cycles in light green. Without the checksums identifying the suspect numbers, these tables of astronomy could not have been formed. The Greek letters and spurs helped to form some tables into groups. Now, there's the tables of astronomy. Now, it's I put in the full size for the full copper scroll, but it's very difficult to see in that side. You can't read the text. So here it is in just up to the row 42. And you can see in dark green the orbits and the cycles of the planets in light green. For instance, there's the orbit of Mars in dark green, the orbit of Jupiter all down the scroll, the orbit of Saturn required multiplication, the solar year, the orbit of Venus, and the lunar year. And you can look at the long-term cycles, which in the previous slide there, I was saying to study those and keep a record of them so you can compare them. Now, I was saying earlier, the additions of the cubits and treasures had neutralized the numbers, and therefore they could be applied as days or years. There were now two archives of astronomy from antiquity, the first with the tabernacle and the second with the copper scroll, to indicate that there was something very sacred lingering behind the scenes. From the book of Hebrews, the Dead Sea Scroll 4Q319, and the Gospel of Judas, it can be gleaned that the priest viewed those conjunctions with Mercury and Venus as a heavenly demonstration of the theme with light overcoming darkness relative to the theme of good and evil, and this is explained in my book, The Mystery of the Tabernacle. The timetable periods on the copper scroll. The ancient method to multiply was to add the biggest number multiple times. For example, to multiply 609 by 9 on row 12 would require 609 to be added in 9 steps, and it is quite revealing where 3 additions of 609 equated to 5 solar years. 6 additions of 609, the recognizable number of 365 or 10 solar years. 9 additions at 5481 equate to 15 solar years. Now, the numbers on rows 9 to 14 were in a case, they were first of all in Greek letters, and then there was these 3 rows were between the east, north, south, and west, as if it was an equation. When the 6 numbers were presented in an equation, there it is, and the total was 609. The total of 609 days converted to 17 solar years when using the solar year of 365.242 days. There were 5 totals of 777 on the copper scroll, of which 2 were alongside the equation with 6209 days at 17 years. This is where the purpose of the number 777 was unveiled, where there were 8 times 777 days in 17 solar years of 6209.114 days, with just 6 days, whole days of an overlap. And there's the 8 times 777. And there was the number 6 in the table to be deducted as intercalary days. The equation was the blueprint to measure time in lots of 777 days, and it involved factoring in intercalary days to synchronize the long-term periods in time to be in tune with the solar year to the very day. A theoretical example of the timetable was to map out 1,000 years of 365.242 days using the 777-day yardstick. Count out 777 days by 407 times, and is equal to 365,190 days. Therefore, 52 intercalary days had to be added to reach 365,242 days, or 1,000 years precisely. The complete list of the periods and their intercalary days formed from the numbers on the copper scroll is shown in layer B. Now there's quite a lot of numbers there, there's 21. There's the periods which were worked out from the copper scroll with the 777-day formula. And there's the intercalary days that had to be added to reach the period exactly to the day. The periods considered continue up to 1 cycle of the zodiac, as do the intercalary days to be added. Now, the intercalary days and some of the periods are shown on the copper scroll, and they were from rows 1 to 16. And they're nearly all between Greek letters, as you can see in the blue. So, for instance, the period of 217 years required 3 days to be added on, and there it is, the 3 days in one module of the intercalary days. And there's the intercalary days to be added on to those periods when measured with the 777. For instance, 1251 days had to be added when measured 24,000 years to get the period to the very day. Here there was 2 modules with the intercalary days to add up to get the intercalary days. And there's the periods in years. Now here's the periods in green shown there, formed by the numbers between the Greek letters. And there's the standard bearer of the 777 days itself. Now, on top of that, there was assembly kits of numbers from the timetable. We also already saw the assembly kit, which formed the 8 periods of 777 days, and there it is, detailed. But on rows 47, 48, and 49, there were these numbers, And on row 47 was the assembly numbers to form, and they formed those periods there. Now, I'm asking you to pause the video and check how 11 literally days from the timetable. I've just referred to those. And there was the first five periods on the copper scroll. And there's the assembly kit numbers, which we outlined in the previous slide. The image of a cross on the copper scroll. 5 totals of 777 ran like a spine down the copper scroll from row 10 down to row 49, as shown in the checksums. Add on rows 10 to row 13, where the 8 times 77 days in 17 years, in the exact place on the spine where the beam would be situated to form the shape of a cross. There's the beam. At the top of the cross were the 5 periods. I just mentioned those 5 periods in a previous slide. How apt it was how in ancient times the east, west, north and south coordinates that encircled the equation on the scroll symbolized the solar cross. Without the numbers identified by the checksums, the cross would not have been formed. Now there's the cross. There's the 5 totals of 777. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the beam with the 8 times 777 in the exact position on the cross where the beam would be. And there's the 5 periods at the very beginning of the scroll. And notice where the checksums had identified the missing or suspect numbers. So you can see the cross could not have been formed without those. The divine name Yahweh on the copper scroll. The ancient Hebrew alphabet originated with pictorial images similar to the Egyptian hieroglyphics and was known as the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. It was striking how some of the tables with the extra treasures in the spurs formed into pictorial images on the copper scroll, which bore a resemblance with the 4 Paleo-Hebrew letters of YHWH. The Paleo-Hebrew letters read from right to left. That position will apply in the rest of the analysis. There's the first images. And take the table here with 777 years. There's the 3 outstretched arms with the extra treasures at those sites. There's the modular version. And look how it looks like the Paleo-Hebrew letter He. There is the table with set at 807 years. The 3 outstretched arms with the extra treasures, the modular version, and look how it looks similar to the Paleo-Hebrew letter He. There's 3 totals of 777, and they're expressed as years. The modular version is there, and look how similar it is to the Paleo-Hebrew letter Wa. And finally, the table adds up to 1653, which is years, with 777 days by 777 times. There is the outstretched arms with the extra treasures. The modular version, there it is. And look how it looks like the Paleo-Hebrew letter Yod. Now, the 4 letters to spell Yahweh were skillfully positioned on the copper scroll. The word spur of a rock on row 10, together with the threshold platform, boulder and parapet elsewhere on the scroll, indicated the ledges jutting out and prompted of having the spurs for the extra treasures. So I'm just saying that justified having those particular spurs. This was complemented where the Greek words perisal on the scroll means a port with columns extending from the main building. And periolus, or excuse my Greek, was boundary stones to indicate imaginary boundaries. Without the numbers identified by the checksums, it would have been impossible to form the name Yahweh on the copper scroll. How divine it was, for the first Paleo-Hebrew letter, Yod, was just above the pedestal at 600 talents on row 61, and the only 600 talents in the Bible was the weights of treasure to decorate the house of Yahweh in Solomon's temple. Now there's the copper scroll, and there's the 4 Paleo-Hebrew letters. And look how they're spread out. They're not overlapped. So you can easily and clearly spell out YHWH. Again, look at the red, the numbers in red, identified by checksums. If the checksums hadn't been applied, you could never have formed the four Paleo-Hebrew letters. And there's the 600 talents, which is down here at the very base, just below the spur of the Greek or the Paleo-Hebrew letter Yod. The sealed scrolls in the books of Isaiah, Daniel, and Revelation. Do you recall the reference to a sealed scroll in the books of Isaiah, Daniel, and Revelation, how nobody could open its seven seals? The sealed scroll was written on both sides, but so was the copper scroll with the shapes of the hammered letters visible on both sides. Had Isaiah the copper scroll in mind when he wrote, "Now go write it for them in a table, and note it in a book, that it may be for a time to come, for ever and ever." It was fitting, because the numbers on the copper scroll had to be written on a table, and the words had been noted on a scroll. The timetable periods on the copper scroll were also with a time to come for ever and ever, as Isaiah had expressed. Isaiah struck a chord with the treasures in the same chapter where he wrote, "You shall defile also the coverings of thy graven images of silver, and the ornaments of thy molten images of gold. Thou shalt cast them away as a menstruous cloth." That was what happened when the defiling coverings of the gold and silver were cast aside, when the numbers on the copper scroll were seen to be significant. Ancient cultures associated the menstrual cycle with the lunar month, and thus Isaiah had insinuated the moon, because he followed up by writing that the light of the moon shall be the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of 7 days. The sevenfold was the raison d'etre of the copper scroll, with 777 days, 7 years, 777 years, 777 plus 777 years, and 7,777 years, and 777 days by 777 times. That was 6 periods with the sevens, and Isaiah made it sevenfold with 7 days. Now we're getting near the end. The inspired numerical masterpiece from antiquity. The scientific wonder with the copper scroll survived the elements of time and space to reveal the stunning masterpiece of superintelligence. How modest the encoding with those 3 layers of numerical data on the copper scroll, involving just simple additions and only 7 multiplications. Then came the rocket science, when the 3 layers of data were overlaid on top of each other, displaying a miraculous jigsaw of numerical wizardry. The image of a cross and the autograph of Yahweh cast a supernatural halo over the time capsule from Qumran. We will end the expedition by browsing through the magical layers of scientific artwork on the copper scroll, which were autographed by Yahweh. Now for the big picture, where science and faith unite. There are the checksums. Just an overview of the checksums. And there is the, on layer B, is the intercalary days and years of the timetable. There was the 2 assembly kits of numbers, again on layer B. There's layer C, with the orbits and long-term cycles of the planets. There was the image of a cross. Now here is a surprise for you. We already showed in black the Paleo-Hebrew letters YHWH. But there was actually a second set in parallel, run in parallel, and there it is. And it was with a period of 777 plus 777 years. This was 777 by 777 years. And it was exactly in parallel with that. Over here, we had the black Paleo-Hebrew letter here with the ages set. But running in parallel was the orbit of Venus and the 777 module in years. Up here, there was the 3 totals of 777. But look at here, in parallel was the orbit of Mars, the long-term cycle of Mars, and the long-term cycle of Saturn. And the 2 were in the same position on the scroll in parallel. And finally, there was the letter H, or He, and it was formed, we've seen it already. But here above it, there was another total of 777. And in the middle, it had 3 orbs of Venus reached out like a spur. And of course, the Greek letters would have formed spurs. So, and again, the last sat on the 600 talents, which was the amount of gold used to decorate Yahweh's room in Solomon's temple. It's now your turn to answer the profound question. Could mere mortals in antiquity have acquired, devised, and encoded the rocket science displays of celestial knowledge on the Copper Scroll? It was equally astonishing where the key opened the seals on the secret scroll was at the other extreme, to simply add the numbers as prompted by the plus signs. The autograph of Yahweh, the image of a cross, and the tables of astronomy could not have been formed without the miracles performed by the checksums. Did this scientific knowledge of astronomy symbolize the architecture of a mystical heaven as visualized by the prophets and autographed by Yahweh? The configuration with the planets overlaid on the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant was the supreme endorsement that such a celestial dominion existed. How fortunate we are that the custodians wrote the keys to the kingdom of the heavens on an endurable copper scroll. There's no longer a need for treasure hunters to go on escapades into the hills looking for elusive crocks of gold at the end of the rainbow. If you would like to debate the issues, chat with me on the blog on my website, and the website is 7biblewonders.com. Thanking you for bearing with me, and please spread the good word about this divine archive of astronomy on the Copper Scroll. Michael Harns, Dublin, Ireland. And I'll log off now, and thank you very much again. And there, final end of the video, and there it goes.